if you
I'm just gonna take off the waiting room. Just so like everyone can join. 3:30 I'll re-enable the waiting room just so like anyone new who's joining. You'll just manually. For everyone who's joining, uh, the session will get started in a few minutes. Just waiting for any last minute people coming into the meeting. Okay, so it's 6:30. I think I'll just get started with the introduction. Basically, this is a meeting. It's a class to learn about what scouting is. It's basically an introduction to scouting for FTC teams, especially FTC teams who have at least about a year of experience. So teams that are in about like their second year. This is a class mainly for you if you have that experience, if you've seen what FTC is like and you kind of enjoy it and you want to take your FTC to the next level. This is kind of what that class is about to be. How this will go is I'll be showing some slides, giving you about 45 to 50-minute presentation. If you have any questions, we'll be doing 2 Q&A sessions. There's going to be a short introduction, a Q&A session, and then there's going to be a longer in-depth session about scouting, and then another Q&A session. If you want, you can raise your hands, and Heather will quickly unmute you if you have a quick question, like that can be answered immediately. Anything that's a little more in-depth, try to save for the Q&A session. I'll try to answer as many questions as I can then. So I think we're good, right? So we'll be using Slido to answer questions. That's going to be the Q&A session. Heather sent the link. So if you want, go into the Slido link and start asking any of the questions that you may have. So I think we'll get started. Just sharing my screen here. Okay. So this lesson is about operating an efficient scouting system. So we have to talk about what scouting is, right? And this is from 12589 Pioneer Robotics. We're an FTC team. We went to Worlds 2 years ago. We went pretty far in the States last year. And we're at a point where we can have a good team of scouters trying to gather data and try to gain as much information about other teams so we can perform really well. And that's what I'm going to be teaching you today. So the first question is, what is scouting, right? Scouting may be what you think it is, may not be. There might be some more to it, right? There's a lot of nuance. And basically, to sum it up, it's a method for your team to determine the quality of competing teams. That's what it is. You want to know how good the other teams are, and you want to know what kind of teams you're going up against and get some information about the teams you're facing when you go into a match. That's what scouting is, to be as prepared as possible. You spend so much work during the year building your robot, programming, doing whatever, right? And if you don't scout and you don't get information about your teams, or you don't have any advantages, or you lose the actual competition, even though you have a good robot, it's all wasted. So scouting is a way to try to help you perform better in competition. So why is scouting important? Well, you can get pre-match info from scouting, right? Every match that you go into is completely random. You're up against 2 random teams and you're with a random team. That's how FTC works, right? You're in a group, you're 2 versus 2. I'm sure if you've had a year of experience in FTC, you'll know this, right? You're against 2 opponents, one's on your team. So it's random and you don't know too much about these teams. In the past, when we've not been using scouting, we just go into these matches and whatever surprises they may be, we have to face on the spot. Whatever issues that we may face, we have to just face them in the competition itself, right? So using scouting will enable us to have a lot of pre-match information, and we'll go into that match prepared and knowing all about our opponents, all about our teammates. Scouting is also great for team placement, right? If you can look at how far you're going, for example, team placement is how far you'll go in a competition, right? If you think you're going to be a captain or a first pick or not a first pick, right? You know that from scouting. So personally for us, scouting has made such a huge difference for us. 12589. We had a really good team of talented people, and we built really great robots. We put countless hours into it, and I'm sure many of you have done the same thing, right? It's common throughout FTC. However, we get to states, we go really, really far, and because we didn't have scouting information, when it came to line selection, we didn't really know what to do. We'd pick the best team that we thought would be the best team, and sometimes that was the best choice, sometimes that wasn't. It can be the difference between winning and losing. If you don't scout, it can be the difference between winning and losing. I have to say that again because it's that important, right? If you don't have the information, picking a bad team can bring down even the best of teams. Also, gracious professionalism, right? That's all about what FIRST is, right? If you can work with other teams or help other teams out with your scouting information, we'll get to later about public scouting, that can also be a benefit. So who should scout, right? Not everyone can scout. Scouting is not the best idea for everyone. I mentioned that teams with 1 year of experience should come and attend the session because that'll be best for them. And I said that with a reason, because if you're in your first year of FTC, you don't know too much about FTC, how it works, and you're learning the basics, I wouldn't recommend that you scout because in that time, you're still learning a lot about FIRST and how it works and all the nuances and how teams work, working with other teams, building, programming, all that stuff, right? You shouldn't weigh down your plate with scouting, at least not at that time. Focus on building that strong foundation. But if you've had a year of experience and you have extra members, right? Those with lots of members, you should definitely scout because sometimes if you have 8 people building the robot, it's not going to be any more productive than having like 3 or 4 people building the robot. It's just not the case. In our case, we had a lot of really talented young men we go to a boys' school, St. John's boys' school. We had a lot of talented young men trying to build the robot. And what ended up happening was not everyone could do that. And we put a lot of our resources into building an amazing scouting system. Took a lot of passionate guys and developed something like this. Teams that have an interest in getting data and knowing about other teams should definitely scout as well, because that's almost what it's all about. Teams that have some experience and can afford to branch out beyond usual FTC. If you don't know too much about building or programming, you should really focus on that, because without a good robot, scouting is going to be useless. You need to have that. You need to be about states level maybe to be implementing scouting. You can do it even earlier, right? Just to get some information about teams. But for a line selection, it's best to be a team that's going into states. So this is our timeline for scouting, right? Scouting is not something that's one and done or something that's like you do and then you stop, right? It's a process. You can't just do it last minute or within a week. It's a long process. It's a lengthy process. It's something you have to do continuously. Otherwise, it won't work. First of all, you have to come up with an idea. You have to think about what your scouting system needs, what your situation is, who your opponents are, and how your scouting system can best tailor to those needs. The next thing you have to do is create a paper scouting system. I'll explain more in depth about what that is, how that works, but that's a scouting system that I would recommend most teams start with. And then after you've developed that and you think you've got it good, you have some extra time, you can optionally create an app scanning system or join a public system. Again, I'll talk more in detail about both of those and we'll discuss the pros and cons of each. Next, you have to organize, plan, and train. You have to refine your system that you're using for competitions. You have to plan, you have to train, go into qualifiers, go into scrimmages, use the scouting system, test it out. Often we thought we had a really good scouting system. We took it into a scrimmage or a qualifier and we realized the flaws in it and we were able to really fix it. Getting real-time experience is always, always amazing, but that may not always be the case. The next competition may be states and you don't have time to test it in a real life match. So the best thing you can do is train. What we did was we went on YouTube, we watched a lot of videos and try to do this. Last thing is, once you have that scouting data, once you've organized a good team, once you've trained them, got it working, how do you use that? How do you use it to compete and how do you scout successfully? So we'll be going for our first Q&A session. Munib will share the Slido screen and I'll be answering some of your questions. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in here. Is anyone having any issues joining Slido? If you are, just go ahead, type it in the Zoom chat if you're having any issues. We'll just wait a couple minutes. If no one responds by about like 6:42, we'll just go on with the presentation. I'm assuming you've understood everything I've said. So take time, think of any questions that you may have. The chat is disabled. The Zoom chat? Okay, but I see the Slido chat's working, so just, yes, go there. If you have any questions in Zoom, raise your hand. Heather will unmute you so you can participate. You can ask a question. How long have you been in FTC? We've been here for a few years, right? I personally have been in FTC for about 2.5-ish years, right? I joined about halfway through freshman year. I joined my school team, Pioneer Robotics, and I loved it. That's why I continued robotics into sophomore and junior year. Our team has been here. It's actually relatively new team. We haven't been here for more than 4 or 5 years, so we have some experience, but we haven't been here for a long time. The guy who created the team actually graduated last year. So where are we located? We are located in Massachusetts. That's actually really important. We'll get into that later. So yeah, we're located in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. So a Google spreadsheet for scouting. How does a Google spreadsheet for scouting compare to a paper scouting system or an app scouting system? So the paper scouting system is a little bit different. We'll get into Google spreadsheets and app scouting system later. I have a Google spreadsheet slide about technology and app scouting. Google spreadsheets and apps kind of go hand in hand, but I'll definitely get into that later. It's more of a nuanced topic. Okay, I'll allow like another. Oh, do you ever use data analysis tools such as Tableau? No, I'm not familiar with that. We usually use Google spreadsheets or Excel. We've also used other systems that we'll get into, but no, we haven't used that yet. So I'll allow another 45 more seconds for anyone who's still typing or still coming up with a question. If not, then I'll continue with the presentation. So this next part of the presentation is going to go into a little more depth about what I've been talking about. That was just a quick overview, quick summary. I'll go into the bit of the more nuance and give you examples from our team and how scouting has affected us. So if you have a question, I'd recommend typing it out now, 20 seconds left, and then we'll start the presentation again. Okay, so I will get into the next part of the session. Okay. So now, when you're creating a scouting system, you need to develop it, right? That was the first step. If you go back, we need to come up with an idea, we need to develop, right? So when you're developing a scouting system, the first thing you have to do is sit and brainstorm. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this as the first step of developing anything. You need to think. You need to think about strategy, especially, right? You think about what do you need? What are you looking for? Now, in our case, we determined that we were a pretty decent team that could get into the captain spots for states because that's where we got last time, right? Last year, we got really, really far. So we thought we'd get around there. So that was our mindset going into this. And this is really important. You need to think about where your team will be or how far your team will go. You need to have a rough estimate of that. And again, that's why I recommend that this is your second year. So you learn for the first year and you gauge what kind of team you are, what your abilities are. So you need to think about where you're going to be. This is very important because depending on what your position is, scouting is going to work really different from you, right? For example, if you're a captain like we were, scouting is really, really important for picking good teams, right? If sometimes you could pick a good team that doesn't work well with you, right? you need to really think about who works well with you. If you pick the highest ranked team, that may not be the best option. I've been to many competitions where the best teams were not the best teams. They may have been lucky. They may have been paired up with really good teams, and as a result, had an undefeated run, right? So you need to look at who the best team is statistically, not just based on rank. Ranking points and tiebreaker points does not evaluate the quality of team. In fact, sometimes the best team can be like halfway down the list, right? So you need to look at who works well with you. And what I mean by that is they need to be able to cover your weaknesses, and you need to be able to cover their weaknesses. I'm going to use a reference from last year. Last year we had the Skystone Challenge, right? That was FTC Challenge with the stack, for example. You have to bring blocks and whatever. There are two aspects of the teleop portion: carrying blocks and stacking blocks, right? So you're really, really great at stacking blocks, but you're not the most mobile robot. You want to look for a team that isn't the best stacker, but instead can ferry those blocks to you really rapidly and is really efficient at that. The best team there may be a really good stacker, but that might not be the best option, right? Because both of you can't stack at the same time. That's going to be hard. One of you needs to get the actual blocks. So instead of choosing the best team by ranking or points or whatever, choose who works well with you, right? You need to make a picking strategy based on that information. Next, if you think you'll be picked by captain, if you think you're an upper pick, your info may look different. Your criteria, your options may look different. So you need to think about which captain is best, right? If you get picked, you can't really refuse unless you're really high pick. But for this example, we're just not going to talk about that, right? In FTC, if someone picks you and you refuse, no one else can pick you. So usually that means you're eliminated. So you pretty much have to accept. However, there is something you can do. If you look at which captains are best, which of the four teams, there are four captains, by the way, in case you didn't know, which of the four teams works well with you, right? It's the same criteria, the first question right here, who works well with you. You need to look at maybe the highest ranked team, number one, is not the best option. Maybe number two is, maybe number three is, right? If you're pick number five, you can say no to number one because maybe number two can pick number three or number four and you can move up, right? You need to think, can I say no to this team? Can I say yes? If I say yes, what are my options? Will I be eliminated? Will I continue on? Those are all questions you need to ask. And if you're an upper pick and you're not a captain, this gets a little bit more complicated because there's a lot more variables, a lot of things that can go wrong, go right, right? And once you've decided what your strategy is going to be, who you're going to say yes to, who you're going to say no to, what circumstances there are, you need to convince the teams that you're talking to. Whoever is the captain of your team, you need to scout them. You need to see what their strengths are, and you need to go talk to them, right? If team A is better than team B, but team B fits with you better, you want to go talk to team B. You want to go with them. You need to convince them to pick you. And how are you going to convince them? Now, for any team that's been a captain at FTC, I think you'll kind of understand what I'm talking about. Say you're the first pick, you're going to get a lot of teams come to you say, "Hey, pick us. We're a really good team. We work well with you. We have really good stacking ability, whatever." Without scouting data, you can't really prove any of this, right? If the captain doesn't have any scouting data, obviously they won't know, right? They'll have to take your word, which may not be the best thing. They'll just make their own judgment. It's likely they'll ignore you. If you have some solid data that you can show them, that speaks wonders. You can show them a graph. Look, these are all the teams. These are the stacking abilities of all the teams. We've used a mathematical model to create this chart, and we are second place, second only to one of the captains that goes before you. So if you're looking for a team that can stack and you can't stack, you should pick us, and the data shows why. That is like a difference between night and day. If you have scouting, you can really convince those teams to pick you. They may not have picked you before, they may now. That may be the difference between making it to eliminations and getting out in the qualifiers, right? And obviously, a majority of teams won't be captains or won't be upper picks. They just might be those 19, 18 ranked teams that may not get into elimination rounds. Scouting is still important. Again, like I said before, match strategy is everything. If you're going into a match and you know that the two teams against you can't really stack, but your partner is good at stacking and you're not, or that you have better autonomous than your partner, or that the other team always has this weird quirk in their autonomous, you can think about that. You can build around that. If you know what's going to happen in the match, that can change everything. You can also analyze your own weak points, right? If you're a robot and we all have that bias, right? If you build a robot, you're obviously going to love it. It's going to be perfect in your eyes. However, that's obviously not going to be the case, right? There's always going to be some weaknesses. And numbers can show that better than almost anything else, right? So even if you don't think you'll make it to the elims, you should still scout. You should still, because you see how well you're doing and what you can fix. You also have info on your teammates, right? So once you've analyzed how far you go, what you're looking for, and you think about what scouting means to you and how important it is for you, you can start to come up with a system to get that data and that data only, right? You don't want to concern yourself with useless data. Don't waste time coming up with data that will not help you. That's why this is so important, to streamline it and make it really efficient. If you gathered all the data in the world, you're never going to finish scouting. It's not going to happen. So you need to be efficient and you need to get data that helps you the best. So let's talk about paper scouting, right? We need to come up with a paper system. So this is an example of a paper system that we've had last year, right? And 2 years ago, it was a very similar system. Basically, we created a double-sided printout on cardstock. Why cardstock? Well, it's firm, it's durable, and you can write on it well. It's better than normal paper. If you're sitting on a chair and you don't have like a clipboard or anything, it's really easy to write on. Just from scouting experience, it's really good. So definitely try to print on cardstock if you can. When you come up with a paper system, you need to think about that data that you determined in the previous step and try to format it in a good way that works right here, right? For example, you can see what we're looking for. We're looking for right here, this is the round number, match number, teammate, and what color they are, what alliance they're on. This is information about the team itself. And we carry that out for 5 rounds. Then we have information about autonomous right here. This is for Skystone last year. So we want to know what side they started on, how many Sky Stones they picked up in autonomous, how many stones they scored, how many they placed, right? Whether they repositioned the foundation, etc., etc. We looked for certain types of data and we put that on the sheet and we got that data, right? There are other things. For example, did they crash into the, I don't know, bridge, or did they move the foundation immediately, or did they go for Skystone 2 or Skystone 3, right? There's a lot of other data that you can get when you're analyzing an autonomous situation. But we didn't put all that there. We only put what was necessary for us. We thought that these categories were important and that would help us make a good decision. So we put that on the scouting sheet. Likewise in Tally Up, as you can see, we had to iterate through this. For example, when we started, we kind of based the system off a referee system. The referees have a system for scoring teams, but it's different because they're scoring the whole alliance. They're not scoring individual teams, right? So we had to adapt it. For example, we looked at how high the robots stacked their stones initially, but then we took it out. We realized that that wasn't really important. And you can make that decision, right? That all comes with analysis. What's going to be important for you? So once you have the data that you're looking for, you need to put it in an organized way. I personally really like this design that we came up with. It's like a true false. It's a Boolean thing, right? Red or blue, building or loading, right? Yes or no. It's when you're scouting and you're looking at a team, you need to keep your eyes on the robot. And for a second, you can look down and make a mark. If you're going to be writing red or blue or how many Skystones they scored, it's not going to work. So personally, creating something like this is really good because you can quickly annotate the information that's going on during the game. These are blank because we put tally marks there. We put tally marks on how many stones there are, how many they placed, how many stones that the robot and stone crossed on the line. These are all important when you're thinking about how good a robot is, right? So you have the data you want, you've organized it accordingly, and now you made it really easy to take track of. And you put it on cardstock. That's all it is. That's all a paper system is. Now you come up with that paper system, now you have to organize it, right? You want to read the game manual part 2. Now, if you're not familiar with what that is, FTC has two game manuals, Game Manual Part 1 and Game Manual Part 2. Game Manual Part 1 is about the game in general. From year to year, it doesn't really change too much. Whereas Game Manual Part 2 is about this year's game, this year's challenges, and all the aspects and rules that are associated with it. Also, read the forum. So if you read those two things, you get a lot of information about how scouting works. Okay. And if you can get a lot of information about how scouting works and the nuances of the game, you can actually change your system. We've had a lot of mistakes where we assume certain things. What if a team builds 3 high and knocks it down? Who gets the points? Or what if a team, for example, let's look at placing, right, in autonomous. What if a team takes a block, drops it on the foundation, and it lands on the edge? It's touching the floor and it's touching the foundation. Is that in? Is it not? We thought it was not. But when we studied the rules and we analyzed it, we actually realized that it broke the plane, the vertical plane of the foundation, and it was therefore in. If you've done Skystone, I think you know what I'm talking about. But that's an example, right? You need to tell your scouters that that's the case, because the referees, they will score that. They'll say, oh, this team placed a stone there. If you don't say that they placed a stone there, your data is going to be off, and that's bad. You want your data to be as accurate as possible, right? Because if they're placing a lot of these stones in autonomous and you miss that every time, you're going to think the team's worse than they actually are, and that can impact your decision. So it's very important to be informed on the rules. And when you're creating the system, know those rules and adapt your system for that to try to come up with those loopholes. So when you're making the sheets, make it as intuitive as possible. And again, come with tallies, circling versus writing. Right here, we have notes for penalties, but you're only expected to scribble a couple of words there. We're not writing paragraphs. So you want to make this quick and easy. That's very, very important. The next thing you have to do is iterate. You have to iterate and you have to practice. You have to use this, print out a couple copies, watch a YouTube video. What we did is in our lab, we pulled up a live stream of competitions from Michigan or Maryland or wherever, right? Where there were qualifiers. We just pulled them up and we watched those live streams or those recorded live streams. And we said, okay, let's all scout the robot on the bottom right, team 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we'd scout all those teams, and if there were any of those situations like I talked before, those fringe situations where you don't really know the rules, you can always look it up, right? So that's what we did. We came up, we tried to iron out all the mistakes, we iterated, we kept changing it, and we made it, try to polish it down as much as we could. Now, once you have that good system, have every scouter try to scout the same team, because you need to train your scouters now. You need to come up with a team of guys that are going to be there and use the system in a match. We say have 5 guys, 4 guys to scout one team each, and 1 guy to manage these papers, the paper, right? Because in between matches, there's going to be a lot of paper shuffling. You need to grab the paper, pass out the right paper with the teams that are going on. It's actually a lot more difficult than it sounds. So you need to have one person dedicated to that to keep yourself organized, because without organization, this is not going to work. So take those 4 guys who are going to be scouting. Again, do what I said before, come up with that drill, scout the same team over and over again, or scout one team, then the next team, all at the same time, and try to make sure they're getting very consistent scores. Person A, B, C, and D are all getting the same issue. Sometimes, it's all getting the same score without any issues. Sometimes one person would have an issue, their score would be off by a significant amount. We look at that and we try to understand, why did you score this way? Was our system not intuitive? Did you make a mistake? Did you not understand the rules? And try to fix those issues. Again, keep practicing, keep using the system, polish it down, get it perfect. It's going to be really great. That's how efficient it can be. A lot of teams, for example, scouting, as I've seen it, has changed in the past couple of years. When we started scouting, people would take a notebook, a clipboard, go to teams of 4 matches and ask them. This is different. This is live and during matches, right? So it's a little bit different. There are a lot of new things that are going on here. So if you can embrace this, you can be ahead of the game, okay? So also, one thing when you're doing is always throughout the whole scouting system, right? Irrelevant of the system, you need to measure ability, not score. Now, I know that maybe that might seem counterintuitive, but let me give you an example here. Let's have robot A and robot B in a match against each other. Robot A stacks 8 stones in Skystone, which is pretty good, right? And Robot B stacks 2 stones. But at the last second, A bumps their foundation and knocks over the whole tower. B ends up winning the match because they have a higher tower and they won by a few points. So when you're looking at it from a score perspective or a ranking perspective, B's the better team here, right? Because they performed well. And you can make an argument that they're reliable. But think about it, who really was a better team? It was team A because they were able to stack really high. Now they had a freak accident, but you want to take those freak accidents out of there. For example, if we measured a teams that stacked like 7 stones and they knocked it down, we wouldn't take those. We wouldn't take those away. Even though the score might be off, we want to measure ability. Can they stack 8 stones versus did they stack 8 stones? Because what's likely is in the next match, it's not going to happen again. They're not going to make the same mistake again. Okay. And the reason I'm spending so much time on this paper system is this is the foundation. Everything else draws off of this foundation, right? So if you come up with a system and you make it really good, anything you build after this is going to be really solid, right? So, but when you're measuring ability, also don't take it to the other extreme, right? If team A stacks 8 and knocks it down every single match, that's a reliability issue now. That's no longer just they can stack 8, but it falls down occasionally. That's a real problem. And I have to think, is B the better team? Because they're consistently getting 2 versus A is getting 8, but they've never actually managed to get it because they knock it down every time. So that's something you also have to think about. And that's where the notes come in. You have to note, okay, they got 8, but they knocked it down, right? Usually notes are for qualitative stuff, whereas this is more quantitative stuff. And if you train your scouts in this way and you teach them to recognize certain things, for example, that last principle of we used to say if a team knocks it down, erase it. Who cares? We're not going to get that. But as we went on, we realized that that may be important. We need to look at what teams can actually do versus what teams do in match, right? What the potential is versus what they really do. And that comes with practice, that comes with training, that comes with scouting. Okay. So that's how a paper scouting system works. You take those papers, you give them to scouters, they spectate and they scout, right? They scout match after match after match. One thing you have to do that we determined personally was you get a list of all the teams that are going to be there. And when you get to the qualifier, you get a schedule. Excuse me. Put all the matches that teams are going to be in. For example, team 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is going to be match 1, match 9, match 13, match 23, and match 30. Write that down and circle whether they're going to be in the red and blue. So when you hand them out to the team, they don't have to fill in that information. They can get started right away. You can save a lot of time that way. Before a competition actually starts, if you're waiting around and judging, do this. Get your system organized, get it sorted out. And one of our organizers, just kind of like a tip here, what we did was we had a multi-pocketed binder and we put groups of rounds. So for example, the 4 teams that would go in round 1 would go in that first group. The 4 teams that would go in round 2 would go in that second group, round 3, round 4, round 5, and so on. And whenever the next round came, you take all the papers, put them back, take the next one, end up quick as that, right? Be organized, be efficient. This will come to you, right? If you don't memorize everything I'm saying, that's perfectly fine. This will come to you. It'll be intuitive if you go through this iteration process. That's doing this will make you develop a really solid scouting system. If you can do this, you're going to be really, really good. Okay. So once you've developed this solid scouting system, now you need to think, do I need to go on? Is this the best option for me? Right? Because you have all your basics, you spent a lot of time, you've iterated. Again, I spent a majority of the presentation talking about this because this is really what the bulk of it is, developing your scouting system. That's the most important thing here. If you don't have a good scouting system, it's not going to be a good scouting system, simple as that. Once you follow these steps, once you've iterated, gone through those steps, created a really reliable system that's easy to use, train your scouters, organize, plan, you go to the next step. Scouting with an app or technology. This is optional. You do not have to do this. If you have extra time, if you have extra people, if you have some talented programmers, you can create something like this. Someone asked a question before about Google Sheets. This is an Excel spreadsheet. What we did was with a paper scouting system, we actually relayed this data. So in live time after the match, we'd get those 4 finished scouting sheets of round 1. Someone would take a picture of those scouting sheets and send them to actually is Munib. He's in this call right now. Munib was a guy who would take down this data. He'd sit off in the distance with his computer and enter in this data. So in round one, they got these many points or whatever, right? So you can create a really organized list of the teams versus rounds, plot that data, and create a simple chart. If you have some Excel experience, this is not a very difficult thing to do. And it's really cool. It's really, really cool. If you can, for example, let's look at this team, 6032. This team is obviously really, really talented, right? Their numbers are the highest of them all. This is their total points. But there's an issue here. They didn't get any points in round 5. So this is where, like, if you're looking at these numbers, if you're looking at a bunch of charts, you don't really see what's going on here. You don't really get the full picture. But if you look at this, you can really visualize that data. That's where technology can really be a benefit. If you're using paper, what you have to do at the end of the match, at the end of the competition, is look at this team, look at this team, look at this team, try to look at the numbers, see what team is good. But with a picture like this, with a graph like this, although it takes a little bit of extra effort, it saves you a lot of time. And it looks really, really cool. If you're trying to convince a team and you are, say, team 133, you may be ranked like 20th, but you can show 6032 that like this is your team, and they'll be like, wow, you're a team that's really reliable, right? Because those bars are all equal length, so they're really reliable. Again, each of these bars, the height is the amount of points they scored in a round, okay? So for example, using points to measure how good the team was. So each of those bars determine how many points. So if those points are really spaced out, really equal, it's a reliable team. They're consistently getting this many points. So you could expect that they'll get the same thing. Whereas this team, this may be an issue. Even though they're really, really good, they're like way ahead of everyone else. What happened in that last round? There's no 5th round there. You need to look at that team. Maybe their robot broke. Maybe for alliance selection, their robot's not going to work. They may be the best team there, but if their robot's completely broken, you shouldn't pick them. And that you won't see that without scouting. If we didn't have scouting, you just pick them and you'd be screwed. Just that's it. So you have to create an organized system that has all these aspects, organize them properly. And I'll talk about an app in the future, but when you're trying to scout with technology, there's some do's and don'ts. You don't want to do something like this. This is using your phone's notepad to just write down teams. Like, look at this and look at this. This is a lot of really interesting data that's really good, really consistent. Whereas this is just like some notes like circuit breaker is bad. Why are they bad? Right? They may not be bad. You might just be wrong. Don't do this, okay? This is something that you don't really want to do. This is actually from a team at Worlds. We saw this at Worlds. They're a very talented team, but the scouting system could use some work, right? This is, if you follow these steps, you can take it from this to this, okay? When you're scouting with an app. So if you take this system, one thing I mentioned was that you need to have someone organizing the papers, shuffling it out, handling all that. And at the end of the day, you have to look at all those papers and look through the data and try to find out what's good, what's not. An app can help you with that. Instead of using circling or writing, develop a phone application, for example, on Android, that embodies the same system. Have it connected to a database. Convert that data into JSON. If you don't understand that, that's perfectly fine. But if you have someone who's talented with programming or app development, they may be able to develop something like this that your team can use. I've seen it a lot with other teams. In fact, some teams do it for outreach. They develop an app for scouting and they publish it to the App Store. So you can try to go and look for those and use them. You can all bring iPads or phones and just push buttons instead of writing. If that's better for you, that's better for you. If it's not, it's not. It may be good for sending data, transferring data. That's always really great. An app's great for that. An app's also really great for analyzing data, right? We had to take pictures and Munib had to enter in all of this data so we can get this really cool graph. With phone, not the case, right? It's automatically sent to the database. You pull from the database and you can get this. Really cool. You can force some advanced algorithms on it, whatever you want, right? So technology is always a great thing. However, there are some cons. One thing is it may be unreliable. A lot of the times when we've gone to competitions, we've gone to a competition and there was no Wi-Fi there. That will destroy your app scouting system. And that's exactly why I say you have to come up with a paper system first. If you come up with an app system alone and you don't have that foundation, you don't have something to fall back upon, you're in big trouble. Because if you don't create that paper system first, you have nothing to fall back upon. If there's no Wi-Fi or your app crashes or the phone stopped working or something, there's a lot that can go wrong with an app versus a paper system. An app system can be unreliable, even though it's good, it can be unreliable. So you need to have something to fall back upon. It's very important. This happened to us actually. All I think this year at one of our qualifiers, we developed an app and we had it ready to go. And at the last second, just wasn't working. Everything that was necessary wasn't really complete. We didn't really understand what the issue was until much later. So we made an executive decision. Look, the app's not really working. We don't have people to scout this. We don't have the phone to download it on, whatever. So instead, we're going to fall back on paper system, and it worked fine, right? It may not have been as best as possible. Maybe we ran out of time to prepare, right? No one's perfect, right? So you can create something using technology, but always have that paper system to fall back upon. It's very important. So you're not just left black. And so yeah, when you're using technology such as this, always a great thing. Have a backup though. That's all I'm saying. Public scouting. This is this is a unique idea when it comes to scouting. Mass FTC. This is why I said our location is really important. This is an alliance that we developed in Massachusetts for scouting. It's called Mass FTC Scouting Alliance. I don't know. So basically, how it works is that you have a bunch of teams, so just say like 8 to 10 teams or whatever, that are sending 1 or 2 members each to scout. They all work together on a computer-based scouting system. And what we did was we created a Google Chrome extension. I don't have a picture here, unfortunately. I'm sorry. I wish I could, but I don't. We had a Google Chrome extension that we used to scout good teams. It was developed by a really talented guy. It was really, really high quality, and that's kind of the quality you get when you're working with 8 to 10 teams. You can get some really talented guys. You get the best of all those teams, right? Collaboration helps everyone involved. Public scouting is also a really great thing for teams that don't have that many members. I said you need like 4 or 5 guys scouting, and at states with a paper system, you may need 8 because matches go one after the other. You can't really switch. You may need 8 or 9 people. And that's not a reality for many of these teams, right? A lot of these smaller teams need those guys to build and to program. And of course, I completely agree. You may not have 10 guys to scout. So public scouting is probably going to be an option for you. You can send 1 or 2 people to go and scout. And what we do is in Mass FTC, we compile all this data, we put them all on one computer, we merge it, and we put them all on flash drives and hand them out to every team. That's something we did just to be like generous and embrace the spirit of gracious professionalism. So, okay, I think Munib can screen share the Mass FTC thing. So he actually has an example of this. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a second so he can show you. So how Mass FTC worked is that we all collaborated to try to get teams working together. Yeah, this is an example of the software that we use. It looks really cool. You can, all right, you can kind of see a lot of these similarities between this and the paper system, right? How you track deliveries, how many stones you delivered, how many stones you placed, how many they stacked, did they move the foundation, yes or no? Like, did they put a capstone, yes or no? Did they park, yes or no? But you also have some places for extra data, such as like the amount of stones stacked. What's really great is that with this technology, you can report some cool math and stuff. And what we did was we downloaded this as a JSON file, and we distributed it among all the teams. This is really great in the spirit of gracious professionalism because we're working with other teams to help everyone out. Judges love that. That wasn't our intention, but the judges loved it. What the other teams went and said, look, Pioneer Robotics helped create this scouting system that helped us out, and we won an Inspire Award for that. So that's something that can really, really help you, right? This can be something that you can use to take that next step in judging. For example, if you work with other teams and try to help them out in scouting, it's an option for every team, right? All you need is like 1 or 2 people. It can be an option for you. And most states, I don't think, have anything like this. For all I know, Mass FTC is a unique system. Maybe there's something like this everywhere else. If there is, I'm not aware of it. But for teams in, for example, like Maryland or whatever, wherever you guys are from, you guys are from all over the United States, you can create something like this. You can go talk to some team and say, hey, why don't we create a group scouting system to get data for everyone. Try to disseminate data in the spirit of gracious professionalism. That's a cause that everyone will get behind. So it's something that you can do. It's something that I'd recommend you do. So I'll get back to sharing my screen again. So that is kind of how public scouting works. Again, as you can see, it's based on that paper system. Everything is based off the paper system. Once you have that paper system that's been iterated upon, it's been tried out, it's been tested, it works, then you can build off it. Public scouting was based on the criteria we needed for the paper system. So that's what we did. So in states, you may need a lot of people. And again, for small teams, this is really, really perfect. However, there are some downsides, right? The downside of this is that you don't have the complete control of the system. What I mean by that is when we're talking about the paper system, you can look for certain types of data, you can ignore other types of data and whatever, right? For example, if we didn't need stacking, we could take out stacking. If we didn't need how many trips a team made, we could take that out, whatever. With this system, it's with 8 to 10 teams. So you don't have as much say on what goes on. You don't have much control about what happens here. Because we were the ones who were kind of like starting this thing, we had a lot of influence on what happened. And that was great for us, great for everyone actually, because we were able to give really good scouting data. But the problem is if you have your own team, you can create a really well-oiled system with guys you know and trust. Whereas if you're working with other teams, they may not have put in as much work as you, or you can't train them like you can train your own guys, right? Your own teammates, right? So you don't have as much faith in their abilities. However, for smaller teams, this is simply a situation we'll have to deal with. There's a lot of good that can come out of it as well. But if you know your guys, you can manage them accordingly and create a really well-oiled system. Last year we had a paper system and we created the Excel spreadsheet right here. This is what we did last year. Sorry, the year before for Rover Ruckus. When we went to Worlds, this is the system that we used. It was really good. It worked great for us. So again, there's nothing wrong with the paper system, right? This is the paper system, and we used an Excel spreadsheet to just take that data. We didn't use the app 2 years ago. Last year, we used paper system and moved to public scouting and MassFTC. I would recommend MassFTC as well. I think MassFTC requires less effort, but it wasn't as good as a paper system was in terms of quality, right? Because in competition, there's a little bit of room for error. And if you're working with other teams, the system is prone to errors. If anyone makes a mistake, the system's kind of in trouble. We had a situation where one of the guys we were working with made a mistake or messed up something on the scouting system, and we had bad data. So when we couldn't merge his data with everyone else's. So unfortunately, we were missing a lot of the data. And that happens, right? Sometimes there's mistakes, sometimes people mess up. But when you're working with a lot of teams, the chance that someone messes up is a little bit greater than your own team because you kind of know what's going on a little bit more. So public scouting is a little bit less, it's a little bit more out of control. But again, there's so many good benefits of this thing that I would definitely recommend public scouting as well. Paper scouting, app scouting, public scouting, all really, really solid strategies. Are there other systems for scouting? Sure, there are. I'll explain a couple. I explained before, some teams take an iPad or a notebook, go to teams before the match and ask, can you do this? How many stones can you stack? Can you, how reliable is your timers? How many points can you get, right? There are some pros and cons. I'd say more cons than pros. It's a really easy way to get data. That's what I'm saying. If you want an easy system, do that. It's not the best way. Right? Usually the easiest system is not the best system. Teams can lie. Unfortunately, that it's a competition, so teams may not be as willing to give you all of their data. It's best to watch and see. Often teams can be telling the truth. We can stack 5, but an issue can happen, right? And that number may be wrong. So I'd recommend watching yourself and coming up with the data instead of asking others for data. So that's why I didn't talk about that here. I wouldn't recommend as much as I recommend these 3 systems. But again, if there's anything that you want to create, feel free. I'm not forcing you to do anything. These are 3 systems that worked really well for Pioneer Robotics. They got us really, really far in states last year and got us to Worlds the year before. So I know they work. So yeah, the next thing is how to use the data. You've developed a good scouting system. You created a paper scouting system or an app scouting or public scouting, whatever. You have the data that works well. How do you use it? I've said this like 3 or 4 times already. Match strategy is important. When you're going to a match, no matter how good you are, if you have information about your teams, it makes you a better team. No doubt about it. If you know how good your teammate is, game changer. We've gone up, for example, we go into a match and we look at a team and we can say, is this a good team? Is this a not so good team? How reliable are they? How high are they ranked? And we see, okay, this team can move stones from one side of the field to the other, but that's it. They can't do autonomous, they can't stack, they can't do anything else. That's fine. We create a strategy for them. We say, okay, autonomous, stay off to the side. We'll try to do as much as we can. Whereas if we're going up again or going with a team that has a really reliable autonomous, you could say, you know what, we'll step aside, you do your autonomous. And you won't know that unless you scout. Here's a situation that we had, for example. If you're not scouting, you can go to a team and say, look, our autonomous is better than yours. Your autonomous isn't as reliable. So I think we'll be doing autonomous. They can say, no, our autonomous is actually better. So we're not going to do that. And you getting in arguments like that is not good. You're working together, right? You need to function as best as possible. If you have scouting data, you can say, look, these are the stats. This is the data we've compiled. They'll be way more willing to trust you. They'll say, oh, wow, okay, you know what you're talking about. We'll trust you here. Create a good autonomous plan. IntelliOps say, okay, look, autonomous, you stick over to the side. IntelliOps, go pick up the foundation, bring it here. I'll do this, you do that. I'll do this, you do that. Whatever, right? So when you do that, you can create a really strong system because you're using it based off knowledge, based on stats. Again, if you don't have scouting, none of this can happen. You can ask a team how good they are, what they're good at, but you don't know anything about them. You can't come up with any strategy. Scouting is a game changer when you're going into a match. It's a game changer. If you have information, it makes you a way better team. If you're like a 15th, 16th place team, it can make you one of the picks if you know how to scout. I'm really saying that it can make you one of a really good pick. Speaking of picking, if you're a captain, right? If you need to make team selections, scouting's also really, really important. One thing that we did was we would go up to teams and say, look, I know you aren't scouting, you have a pretty small team, but you're really talented. We're also really talented. We want to work with you. We think you'll be the best fit for us. We think you should use your first pick to pick us. Here's why. If you pick us, we will let you use our data. We have this whole system of data. We know all about every single team. If you're going up against opponent, we know in and out about them because we scouted them for 5 matches, and we have a really great visual representation. This is valuable data that will make you better. So if you pick us, we'll give you this data. That's really compulsive argument. That's a really great, it's a really compelling argument, right? They'll be really inclined to pick you because you have this data that can help them out. You show your value to them. You say, look, we're a good team and we have this bonus, which many other teams can't say about themselves. That can be huge, right? So if you're picking other teams or you're getting picked by another team, scouting is always important. If you're not being picked or picking, match strategy, again, really, really important. So one thing also, strategy when you're coming up with picking, we had to learn this the hard way. Pioneer Robotics, what we did was we would scout every single team and they'd give us like 5 to 10 minutes at the end to make a team selection, which I say is way too short. We need at least like half an hour to look at these teams and make a really good decision. That's how FTC works. We can't really change that. We have to adapt. How do we adapt? Right? Because picking a bad team will make or break your run. It will. A bad pick can ruin even the best of teams. And it's not even necessarily like a bad pick or a bad team, right? A bad team is not a bad pick. It's not the same thing. Like I said before, you want teams that can work well with you, that cover the weaknesses, right? So you can say, wow, this team's really good. They score a lot in every match, but that's the same skill set as you. That's not a good pick. You won't be able to do anything else. So 2 won't be much better than 1. So if you look at a team and you have the scouting data and you cover each other's weaknesses and create a formidable alliance, that's always great. You want to pick them. right? But you don't have that many minutes. You don't have much time to make these team selections, right? So if you create the scouting system, this is the biggest tip I can offer you. End your scouting early. I'm going to repeat that again. End your scouting early. For example, in qualifiers, each team plays 5 matches, right? And then you go for the eliminations. Scout 4 matches for every team. So you have like 20 round, like you have like 5 to 6 rounds left, and just end scouting there. So instead of 10 minutes, you get 30 minutes, right? You have a little bit less data. You have about like 80% of the data, but that's worth it. You buy yourself so much time by doing that, and you still have enough data to make an educated decision. So I would recommend buying yourself some extra time, getting a little bit like less data, and again, try to make that decision as best as you can. Give yourself as much time as possible. You want to thoroughly analyze all of your options and how they can help you and why you should pick them. The next thing is when you're going up for team selection, you want to have a list of teams. Say you're the 3rd captain. First can pick anyone, second can pick anyone. They can say no. A lot of things can happen. So you want to have 4 or 5 teams up there just in case your team gets picked, right? You want to have a list of teams in a hierarchy. That's really, really difficult if you can't scout. That's so hard for teams. Teams can say, okay, first team A and team B are really, really good. However, after that, we don't know what's going on, right? I'm gonna wrap this up really quickly, okay? So we can do Q&A, right? So team A and team B are really good, and team A and team B get picked. So now they're stuck. They have to pick a random team, and they lose as a result of that. It's happened to many teams. I've seen it happen. It almost happened to us too. If we didn't have scouting, we wouldn't know how to do this. So when you're creating a list of teams, you can create it based on criteria. So you can sort by how good their autonomous is, or how good they can stack, or how reliable they are, and you can get a sorted list based on that data, right? If you use an app or technology, something, you can just sort, right, by how reliable their autonomous is, and then you instantly get a list of 15 teams. So if team 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gets picked, picks team 6. You know who to pick. You know who's next in line. Makes you really informed. Really helps you out when you're doing align selections. So, and all this comes from the very first step, thinking about what you're looking for, who you are, and what you need, right? And when you have those numbers don't lie. Even though a team may not look too good, you see that their stats are really, really good. So sometimes the numbers and your eyes may like conflict with each other. Trust the numbers don't lie, okay? So this is how you try to use the data. Once you have that scouting data, you can make really good match strategy and team selections. So let's recap. How do you build a good scouting operation? First, you need to think about strategy. You need to brainstorm. You need to come up with a good idea. You need to develop that good system, right? You then need to choose the method, whether it's going to be like public scouting or paper scouting, whatever, right? Start with a paper scouting if you can, right? If you only have 2 teams, if you only have 2 people on your team, you probably aren't going to be doing paper scouting anyway, so you might as well just join the public scouting, make that decision. If you have enough people to develop that paper scouting, iterate, get everything done, right? Try to develop your paper scouting system, polish it as much as you can till it's perfect. Then you can branch off, right? Once you develop and iterate, you can then create an app scouting system or whatever, right? Or create some kind of visual representation, whatever. That's based off of your rock solid foundation. Then you need to delegate tasks and train. You need to choose. Okay, you 4 will have you be scouters. You need to be an organizer. You need to watch them. You need to manage the papers. Then take those guys, train them, watch those videos, have them use your system, and make sure they're getting the same result every single time, that there's no mistakes with them. Sometimes your paper system may be perfect, but if your guys aren't perfect, it's not going to work. You need to make your guys perfect as well. Then go into a competition, scout really well, get good data, and use it efficiently. Use it for match strategy, and at the end of the competition, end early. Spend some time picking teams. You have a sorted list. You're going to be fine. If you can get into elimination rounds with these steps, you're set. You know who you're going to be going up against. You know who the best people are. You know you made the best choice. And oftentimes, if you're a good team that makes a good choice, you're going to win. That's it. And if you don't have the scouting, you can't make the best choice. You're going to be paired up with a not so good team. They're not going to win. Scouting changes your whole team. Okay, So that's it for now. We're going to be going back to Slido and answering any final questions that you may have. So thank you. Thank you for listening to the presentation. So again, feel free to go to the Slido link and click the link, so we have some questions. Okay. Do you guys sell the paper scouting organizer thing? Oh, were you talking about the folder that I was mentioning with all of the little things? We don't make it. We just buy it. It's just a binder. You can find it. It's like a multiple pocket binder. You could probably find it at Walmart. I don't know. We just had it lying around. Just there's definitely a lot of tools that you can use to organize. Have you ever went against your data? Have you ever faced any major problems with teams that showed good data but didn't perform? Yes, right. Like I said before, we look at teams, right, that have really consistent data, but then we watch them and their arm breaks off. Obviously, we're not going to use the data, right? Because the data doesn't matter anymore. The team's completely different. They're not going to work. So use your brain, right? Don't blindly trust the data. Use the data to help you make the decisions. Don't let the data make the decisions for you. That's very important. If you need to go against your data, go against your data. It's your choice. But again, sometimes you may think a team is good, but the data may say differently. So try to trust your data. Don't blindly trust it. Get that balance. You know what I mean. How do you prevent team members from messing around while scouting? Discipline. That's all it is. You need to tell them. Sometimes it's hard to keep people focused. It's hard to stay razor sharp, keep your head in the game. But that's winner's mentality, right? If you want to win, you have to be focused on the competition. You need to tell them, look, we're a good team. We work so hard. We spent hundreds of hours working on this robot. Don't blow it now. Don't blow it for scouting, right? How are you gonna spend hundreds of hours building a really good robot and then scout poorly so you lose, right? Just let them know how important scouting is. Just if they understand the importance of the situation they're in and the fact that they're in a competition, they won't mess around, because if they know if they mess around, they'll lose. That's a very good question, but yeah, it's discipline. You have to let them understand. But sometimes that may not be possible. You may be with a team member that may just mess around like that. That may be the personalities. Then don't choose them for scouting. Sometimes, again, you have to make good decisions when you're picking scouters. Sometimes some people are better at scouting than others. Doesn't mean they're a better person or not, right? Some people have the talents, and it's the same for scouting, right? Good scouters, should probably choose them. So I'll stay here for another couple minutes if anyone has any other questions. Feel free to ask anything about our team, even if it's not related to scouting. I can try to answer as best to my abilities as possible. So yeah, I'll be here. If you don't have any other questions, feel free to leave. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I hope this helps you out. Try to think about what's important for your team and how you can improve yourself overhead. How much time do you spend training scouters? Hours. Hours, actually. We spent recently, we haven't spent too much time because these are scouters that I've done this last year, right? For example, this year I didn't train them too much because they already are experienced in scouting. They did it the year before. But when you're training new scouters, I would say sit with them, tell them like, okay, this is what you do. For example, what I did was I would stream a competition on the board, on a whiteboard, and say, okay, scout robot 1, 2, 3. Okay, scout them, and I'd watch them and watch every move that they're doing, and I'd watch their every move and try to criticize them, give them constructive criticism, try to help them out, try to make them as good as possible. Say, okay, look, maybe this isn't the best decision here, right? If you see, the rules actually say that this is a thing or this is not a thing, and critique them, help them out there, right? If you work with them, if you train them, they'll get good. Thank you for the presentation. Yep, thank you for listening. Again, I'm really happy that you guys came out here and hear me speak. Really humbling that you want to hear from us. I hope you learn a lot. How many team members that you have? You know, it fluctuates year to year. We have actually like 20 plus team members. So we actually have more than the limit. FTC allows us to have 15. So we have a little bit more than that. So sometimes team members may not be able to be in the pit at all times. So we have a big group of guys just sitting in the bleachers and scouting. For example, we had like 7 or 8 people that couldn't be in the pit, that weren't registered for that. Recently in competition, we actually registered fewer than 15 people, so we just to let people focus, and we just had everyone else in the stands scouting, being active. So in a nutshell, scouting is just observing other teams to pick. Not necessarily, not completely, right? If you're a captain, that's one of your goals. Again, like I said, match strategy is also really, really important. Scouting can make you a better team. If you know your teammate, if you know who your teammate is and what they're good at, the strategy that you can come up with is amazing. I've made so many decisions. I was coach for a couple competitions recently, and what I would do is I would look at the scouting data and say, okay, this team is good at autonomous, they're not so good at stacking. So I'd say, okay, look, we'd step aside, you do your autonomous, then we switch sides. You work on bringing the blocks over, we'll work on stacking or whatever, right? You can make a lot of decisions that you normally wouldn't make if you have scouting data. So scouting's, if you're a captain, scouting's for picking and performing well. If you're a pick, scouting is for knowing who the good captains are and convincing the good captains with your data, and also for performing well in matches. And if you're not a pick or a captain, scouting is always good for looking how you can improve your team and how you can create strategy in the matches. Again, for every single team, no matter who you are, scouting will help you be a better like match scorer. Right, you can score better matches if you have scouting data. That's just a fact. Any other questions? Just take a couple minutes. I'll still wait here. So if you don't have any other questions, feel free to leave. Again, thank you very much for listening. I know it was a little bit longer. I said 1 hour. It's been 1 hour and 7 minutes. Sorry for that. I just, something I'm passionate about. So I hope this helped you. Hope this was good information. Yeah, I'm just gonna wait like a 30 more seconds, see if anyone has any questions after just coming up with, and they need to type it out. But yeah, 7:38, I think we'll end this if there are no more questions. Thank you. If no one has any questions, thank you very much for coming. Thank you for spending an hour here. Thank you for learning. I hope this helped you out. There's going to be a recording of this, I believe. So if you want to watch back, when you're creating your scouting system, feel free to do that. So yeah.
One last detail I have to say is that if you have any other information or you'd like to request some of the resources we showed today, just send us an email. It'll be on our website, stjohnsrobotics.com, and our email is ftc.pioneer.robotics@gmail.com.
Okay, I don't think there are any more questions. Thank you so much for the presentation. It's so helpful. Yeah, thank you so much for listening again. I hope to help you out. Hope it makes you a better team. That's what it's about. Okay, I think we can wrap it up.